A Respectable Woman by Kate Chopin. The short story A Respectable Woman is a fictional story that has been written by an American Kate Chopin. She wrote this story in the early 1890s. This story has presented the identity of a married woman, and her self-dignity of being a wife as well as struggling to understand her desires. This story is about the main character Mrs. Baroda and her conflict as she finds herself attracted towards her husband's friend. The story takes place on Mr. Gaston Baroda's sugar plantation in Louisiana during 1880s or early 1890s. The main character here are Mr. Gaston Baroda, Mrs. Baroda, and a visitor named Gouvernail. Mrs. Baroda was unhappy to hear from her husband about Gouvernail's visit to their plantation because she had planned to take a rest after their busy winter. She hadn't met Gouvernail before but only heard about him through her husband. Mrs. Baroda unconsciously pictured him to be slim, tall, cynical with eyeglasses, and hands into his pocket. She didn't like him in her imagination. When Gouvernail arrived, Mrs. Baroda was fascinated towards him. She found him quite different in various aspects, very different from her husband's description. She became quite puzzled and tried to find her husband's friend simple and having a reserved personality. He didn't pay much attention to Mrs. Baroda. She also discussed his nature with her husband. She tried to avoid him but there was no change in Gouvernail's nature. One night, she was sitting on a bench alone. She planned to leave the plantation for a while. In the meantime, Gouvernail arrived there and sat just beside her. He provided her headscarf on Gaston's behalf, and started talking about old days and his liking towards peaceful things. Mrs. Baroda found him talkative for the first time. She didn't listen to his words but felt attracted to his voice tone. In the darkness, she wanted to reach out her hands towards him and touched his face with the sensitive tips of finger. She wanted to whisper on his cheeks but controlled herself, and the dignity of being a respectable woman and wife prevented her from doing this great mistake. She stood and left the place. Next, she delighted her husband, saying that she had overcome her dislike for Gouvernail and she will treat him very nicely the next time.